The rain had been a relentless companion for the last 3 hours of Clara's journey, a drumming insistence against the windshield that now echoed the quiet thrumming beneath her own ribs. Finally, the gravel drive of Blackwood Manor crunched beneath her tires, a sound as ancient and welcoming as the gnarled oaks that guarded the estate. The house itself was a study in dignified solitude, dark stone rising against a bruised sky, its windows like watchful eyes reflecting the storm-tossed Atlantic beyond. Clara killed the engine, the sudden silence vast and profound, broken only by the persistent whisper of the wind and rain. She sat for a moment, letting the isolation of the place settle over her, a balm to the city's cacophony she'd left behind. This was it, her sanctuary, her canvas, for the next 2 weeks. She was here to paint, to lose herself in the wild beauty of the coast, and perhaps to rediscover a part of herself that had grown dormant beneath the weight of expectation. Stepping out, the cold, damp air enveloped her, carrying the sharp scent of salt and wet earth. She pulled her cashmere cardigan tighter, her silk scarf doing little to ward off the chill. The front door, a heavy slab of dark oak, yielded with a groan, revealing a vestibule bathed in the warm, flickering glow of a roaring fire. It was exactly as she'd imagined from the photographs. Old-world elegance, a touch of faded grandeur, but imbued with a deep, comforting warmth. A woman with kind eyes and a neat grey bun. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, appeared from the shadows, her smile a soft welcome. "Miss Thorne? We've been expecting you. Come in out of the elements. The fire's been lit, and I've prepared a light supper." Clara returned the smile, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable. It's truly beautiful." "Indeed, especially when the sea puts on a show." Mrs. Gable led her through a grand hall, past ancestral portraits and polished dark wood, to a drawing room that overlooked the churning ocean. The storm raged outside, a magnificent, untamed force, yet inside, the room was a haven of plush velvet, antique books, and the dancing flames of the hearth. As Mrs. Gable went to fetch her bags, Clara walked to the tall windows, pressing her hand against the cool glass. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, a primal roar that resonated deep within her. The sheer power of it was exhilarating, humbling. She felt a stirring, a flicker of the artistic impulse she'd come here to reignite. A formidable view, isn't it? The voice, deep and resonant, startled her. She turned, her heart giving a little leap in her chest. Leaning against the doorframe, a half-empty glass of amber liquid in his hand, stood a man she hadn't expected. He was tall, elegantly casual in a dark cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, his dark hair a little disheveled, as if he'd just run a hand through it. His eyes, a startling shade of hazel, met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I didn't realize anyone else was staying," Clara managed, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Her retreat, she'd been assured, was to be a solitary one. He offered a slow, charming smile, pushing off the doorframe and walking further into the room. "Forgive me, Julian Thorne, and you must be Clara." His voice was a smooth caress, a low murmur that seemed to fill the quiet room. "I'm afraid there was a slight mix-up with the booking. My Aunt Eleanor is rather fond of this place, and I often use it for my own writing retreats. It seems she's double-booked us." Clara felt a flush of annoyance, quickly overridden by an unexpected current of awareness. Julian Thorne. The name was vaguely familiar, perhaps from a book jacket or an article she'd skimmed. He moved with an easy grace, radiating a quiet confidence that was both alluring and a little unnerving. "Clara Thorne," she corrected, the shared surname adding another layer of odd intimacy to their unexpected encounter. "I'm an artist, and I was rather looking forward to the solitude." He chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "As was I. But perhaps fate has a different plan for us, Miss Thorne." He raised his glass in a small salute. "A toast, then, to unexpected company?" Clara found herself smiling despite herself. "To fate, then, Mr. Thorne." Mrs. Gable returned, her expression a mix of apology and bemusement. "My sincerest apologies, Miss Thorne. Mr. Thorne, I truly thought you'd finished your manuscript." Julian waved a dismissive hand. "No harm done, Mrs. Gable. Perhaps it's just the inspiration I needed. Two artists under one roof, with a storm raging outside. It has the makings of a rather dramatic narrative, wouldn't you say, Clara?" He turned his gaze back to her, and she felt the full weight of his attention, warm and potent. Clara's heart did another peculiar flutter. Dramatic narrative indeed. She'd come here for quiet contemplation, not to become a character in someone else's story, especially not one with such an intriguing lead. Yet, there was something undeniably captivating about him, a magnetism that pulled at her senses. The subtle scent of old books, and something musky and masculine clung to him. A heady mix. "Perhaps," she conceded, a slight tremor in her voice. "Provided we don't end up tearing each other's hair out over the last teacup." He laughed again, a genuine, unforced sound that eased the last of her initial discomfort. "I assure you, Clara, my intentions are entirely peaceful. And I'm quite adept at sharing. Perhaps we could even inspire each other." His eyes lingered on hers. A silent question, a promise. Mrs. Gable, ever practical, cleared her throat. "I've prepared supper for you both. In the dining room, if you please." The dining room was grand, with a long polished table that felt far too large for two people. Yet, as they sat opposite each other, the distance seemed to shrink, filled by the unspoken energy that hummed between them. Mrs. Gable served a simple but elegant meal of roasted chicken, seasonal vegetables, and a crisp white wine. Clara found herself more aware of Julian than of the food on her plate. He ate with an unhurried grace, his hands strong and elegant as he handled his cutlery. He asked about her work, about her inspirations, listening with an attentiveness that was both flattering and disarming. "I primarily work in oils," she explained, gesturing vaguely. "Landscapes, seascapes, often with an abstract quality. I try to capture the emotion of a place, rather than just its lightness." "A commendable pursuit," he murmured, his eyes holding hers. "To capture emotion. It's what we writers strive for as well, to translate the ineffable into something tangible, something that resonates." "And what do you write, Julian?" she asked, liking the feel of his name on her tongue. "Mostly historical fiction," he replied, taking a slow sip of his wine. "Stories woven around real events, but with imagined hearts at their core. I'm currently researching a novel set in this very region, during the smuggling days of the 18th century. "Smugglers?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "How intriguing." Indeed, the coast here was ripe for it. Hidden coves, treacherous tides, and a populace with a healthy disregard for king's taxes. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze intense. "But it's the human element that truly fascinates me. The desperation, the loyalty, the whispered secrets exchanged under the cloak of night. The risks they took, not just for coin, but for freedom, for love." The word whispered secrets hung in the air, a subtle thread connecting to the sound of the storm outside, to the unexpected intimacy of their shared meal. Clara felt a strange tremor, a recognition of something deep and resonant within herself. "It sounds like a story waiting to be painted," she said softly, almost to herself. He smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "Perhaps it is. And perhaps you're just the artist to do it justice." The conversation flowed easily after that, drifting from art to literature, from philosophy to the mundane absurdities of modern life. They discovered shared tastes in music, a mutual disdain for pretension, and a surprising number of overlapping acquaintances from a world that felt very far away. The hours slipped by, marked only by the dwindling wine in their glasses and the softening roar of the storm outside. When Mrs. Gable finally reappeared to clear the table, a gentle hint that the evening was drawing to a close, Clara felt a pang of reluctance. She'd come here to be alone, yet this unexpected companionship was proving to be a potent distraction, one she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to resist. "Perhaps we could continue this by the fire?" Julian suggested, sensing her hesitation. "The drawing room is rather more conducive to quiet conversation." Clara agreed, feeling a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. In the drawing room the embers glowed, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. Julian settled into a deep armchair, gesturing for Clara to take the matching one opposite him. The soft lamplight illuminated the planes of his face, highlighting the intelligent glint in his eyes, the faint lines around them that suggested a penchant for laughter. "Tell me more about your painting, Clara," he prompted, his voice lower now, almost a murmur against the backdrop of the crackling fire. "What draws you to the abstract? The raw emotion?" She found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone in a long time. She spoke of her need to express the unseen, the ineffable currents that flowed beneath the surface of things. She spoke of how she sought to capture moments of pure feeling, of longing, of yearning, of the quiet ecstasy found in nature's embrace. As she spoke, she noticed his gaze, steady and unwavering, absorbing every word, every nuance of her expression. It wasn't merely polite interest, it was a deep, perceptive understanding that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in what felt like years. "So, you paint the whispers of the soul?" he said, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through her. Clara's breath hitched. "Yes," she whispered back, the word barely audible. "Exactly that." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. "And what whispers does this place evoke in you, Clara Thorne?" The question hung in the air, potent and intimate. She looked around the room, at the storm still raging outside the windows, at the ancient timbers of the house, at the man opposite her, his eyes holding hers with an almost hypnotic intensity. "A yearning," she admitted, her voice barely above a breath. "For something wild, something authentic, something untamed." He held her gaze, a profound understanding passing between them. "I feel it too," he confessed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "This place, it strips away the layers, doesn't it? Reveals the raw edges of who we truly are, what we truly desire." The air between them thickened, charged with an unspoken current. The fire crackled, a counterpoint to the growing heat in Clara's cheeks. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, even across the short distance separating their chairs. The subtle scent of him, that mix of old books and something uniquely masculine, was more pronounced now, drawing her in. She found herself mesmerized by the way the firelight played across his features, the subtle shift in his expression, the way his lips parted slightly as he watched her. Every instinct in her, every carefully constructed wall, seemed to crumble in the face of his quiet intensity. "It's late," she finally managed, the words feeling clumsy, inadequate. He nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. "It is." He rose from his chair, his movements fluid and unhurried. He walked towards her, and Clara's heart began to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't move, couldn't move, caught in the spell he wove around her. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see the flicker of a question, a profound desire, in the depths of his hazel eyes. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently cupped her cheek. His touch was warm, firm, sending a shiver down her spine. "Clara," he whispered, his thumb stroking softly across her skin, a feather-light caress that left a trail of fire. "You are even more beautiful than I imagined." Her breath hitched again, caught in her throat. She found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a brief, breathless moment. The scent of him enveloped her, intoxicating and irresistible. His other hand came to rest on her jawline, his fingers gently tilting her face upwards. Her eyes met his, wide and vulnerable, reflecting the fierce desire that now burned in his. The world outside, the storm, the grand old house, all faded into insignificance. There was only the heat of his touch, the intensity of his gaze, and the unspoken yearning that filled the space between them. He lowered his head, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't. She couldn't. Her lips parted slightly in anticipation, a silent invitation. His breath ghosted over her mouth, warm and sweet, before his lips finally claimed hers. It was a soft, hesitant beginning, a tender exploration that quickly deepened into something more profound, more urgent. His mouth moved over hers with a practiced passion, a slow, sensual dance that stole her breath and ignited a fire deep within her. She responded instinctively, her hands rising to cup his face, her fingers threading into the soft thickness of his hair. The kiss deepened, becoming a symphony of shared longing, a silent conversation that spoke volumes. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her gently from the chair, drawing her against the hard planes of his body. Her body melted against his, fitting perfectly, as if they had been molded for this very moment. The taste of him was wine, and something uniquely Julian, a heady, intoxicating mix that made her head spin. She felt herself falling deliciously, recklessly, into the abyss of sensation he was creating. His tongue teased hers, a slow, rhythmic dance that sent shivers of pleasure through her entire being. He pulled back, just slightly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling. His eyes, dark and heavy with desire, gazed into hers, searching, questioning. "Clara," he whispered again, his voice raw with emotion. "This is unexpected." "Yes," she breathed, her voice a fragile thing. "It is." The storm outside seemed to rage with renewed ferocity, mirroring the tempest within her. She was here for solitude, for art, for a quiet retreat. Instead, she had found Julian, and a passion she hadn't known she was starved for, a hunger that now roared to life within her. He kissed her again, a deep, possessive kiss that left no doubt about his intentions or hers. The world tilted, spun, and then settled into a new, exhilarating alignment. The whispers of the soul indeed. And they were just beginning. The world tilted, spun, and then settled into a new, exhilarating alignment. The whispers of the soul indeed. And they were just beginning. Julian deepened the kiss, a soft growl rumbling in his chest, a sound that vibrated through her, awakening dormant nerves. Her fingers, which had been fisted in the lapels of his tweed jacket, now uncurled, tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight rasp of evening stubble. His scent, old books, damp earth, and something uniquely masculine, a hint of spice and wood smoke, filled her senses, intoxicating her. She leaned into him, letting her body speak the language her mind was still struggling to form. His hands, firm and possessive, slid from her waist, upward along her ribs, then paused, thumbs brushing the sensitive underside of her breasts through the thin fabric of her blouse. A gasp escaped her, not of protest, but of pure, unadulterated pleasure. It was a bold touch, a promise of more, and her hips instinctively pressed closer against his, an unspoken invitation. The friction of their bodies, clothed as they were, was a delicious torment, a slow burn that threatened to ignite into a conflagration. He broke the kiss, just enough to graze his lips along her jawline, down the sensitive curve of her neck, sending shivers through her. His breath was warm against her skin, and she felt the rapid thrum of his pulse beneath her fingertips. "Elara," he murmured, his voice husky, thick with desire. "You are exquisite." Her own breath hitched. She had never felt exquisite before. Desirable perhaps in fleeting moments, but never like this, never seen with such intensity, such reverence. His words were a caress, a revelation. Her fingers tangled in the dark silk of his hair, tugging gently, urging his mouth back to hers. He groaned, a deep, satisfied sound, and claimed her lips once more, this time with a fervent hunger that mirrored her own. The storm outside seemed to answer, a fresh gust of wind rattling the tall windows, a distant clap of thunder, adding a dramatic percussion to the symphony of their awakening desire. She felt herself melting against him, her knees threatening to buckle, held upright only by the powerful embrace of his arms. "We can't stay here," he whispered against her mouth, his lips moving against hers as he spoke, each word a soft kiss. "Not here. In the cold." His eyes, dark and intense, sought hers, a question, a plea. She nodded, unable to articulate a response, her voice lost somewhere in the roaring current of her desire. The library, with its towering shelves and academic air, felt suddenly too formal, too public for the raw, burgeoning intimacy that was unfolding between them. She wanted warmth, softness, a sanctuary where they could shed their layers, both physical and emotional, and explore this nascent passion without restraint. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a possessive grip that sent a thrill through her. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a small tender gesture amidst the storm of their desire. He led her from the study, the heavy oak door swinging shut behind them with a soft thud, sealing them off from the world, from everything but each other. The hallway was dimly lit by a single sconce, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe with the wind outside. The old house creaked and groaned around them, a living entity bearing witness to their clandestine journey. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging her onward. Every step felt charged with anticipation, with the delicious agony of what was to come. He didn't rush, though the tension in his grip, the taut line of his shoulders, betrayed his own barely contained eagerness. He led her down a short corridor, past a grand, silent staircase, and then turned into another, darker passage. The air here was warmer, tinged with the faint scent of wood smoke and something sweet, like dried lavender. "My rooms," he murmured, glancing back at her, his eyes molten gold in the low light. "A fire is lit." A wave of heat, both internal and external, washed over her. The thought of a roaring fire, a sanctuary from the relentless storm, was a potent lure. She followed him, her hands still clasped in his, her steps light, almost ethereal. He pushed open a heavy wooden door, revealing a room that was a haven of warmth and muted luxury. A grand fireplace dominated one wall, a cheerful blaze licking at the seasoned logs, casting a warm, flickering glow across the space. The air was thick with the scent of burning cedar and something else, a subtle, intriguing fragrance that was distinctly Julian. The room was spacious, yet intimate, furnished with dark, polished wood and rich, jewel-toned fabrics. A massive four-poster bed, draped in heavy velvet curtains, stood against the far wall, an irresistible invitation. Deep armchairs flanked the fireplace and scattered rugs lay across the polished floorboards. It was a room designed for comfort, for contemplation, and she realized with a jolt that sent a flush through her, for intimacy. Julian released her hand, but only to place his hands gently on her shoulders, turning her to face him fully in the firelight. His gaze swept over her face, lingering on her lips, her eyes as if committing every detail to memory. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as if afraid to break the delicate spell that had settled over them. "No," she breathed, her voice a little shaky. "Not anymore." The warmth of the fire, the warmth of his presence, had chased away the chill that had clung to her from the storm. Now a different kind of heat coursed through her veins, a delicious, dangerous warmth that promised to consume them both. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the high collar of her blouse, then moved to the small, delicate buttons. "May I?" he asked, his eyes seeking her permission, a silent question that spoke volumes. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She could only nod, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return. And she wanted nothing more than to cross it, to dive headfirst into the unknown depths of this passion with him. His fingers were surprisingly deft, unfastening the tiny pearl buttons one by one. A slow, deliberate unveiling. Each button released felt like a loosening of her own inhibitions, a shedding of the carefully constructed barriers she had unknowingly built around her heart. When the last button was undone, he didn't pull the fabric away immediately. Instead, his fingertips traced the delicate line of her collarbones, then slipped beneath the fabric, brushing against the warm skin of her shoulders. A sigh escaped her, a sound of pure contentment. He pushed the blouse gently off her shoulders, letting it fall in a silken whisper to the floor, a pool of muted green at their feet. She stood before him in her simple camisole, the thin lace straps barely concealing the swell of her breasts. The firelight played across her skin, painting her in hues of gold and rose. His eyes devoured her, a slow, appreciative gaze that made her skin tingle. There was no judgment, only admiration, a profound desire that was both humbling and exhilarating. He reached out, his thumbs brushing lightly over the lace-covered fabric, just above her nipples, which had already hardened into taut peaks in response to his proximity. To the chill air, to the sheer anticipation. Beautiful, he murmured again, the word a soft prayer. He then moved to the skirt, his fingers finding the hidden clasp, unzipping it with a practiced ease. It slid down her hips, pulling around her ankles, revealing the slender curve of her legs. She stepped out of it, kicking it aside with a bare foot, leaving her in only her lace camisole and matching briefs. She felt utterly exposed, yet utterly safe, utterly desired. The vulnerability was intoxicating. She looked into his eyes, a silent challenge, an invitation. "Your turn," she whispered, her voice husky. A slow smile spread across his face, a flash of white teeth in the firelight. He reached for the knot of his cravat, untying it with a deliberate slowness that heightened the tension. He then unbuttoned his waistcoat, peeling it off, revealing the pristine white of his shirt. Her eyes traced the broad expanse of his chest, the subtle swell of muscle beneath the fabric. He was not overtly muscular, but built with a lean strength that spoke of power and grace. He shed his jacket, then the waistcoat, tossing them carelessly over a nearby chair. Next came his shirt, each button an agonizingly slow release. When it finally came free, he pulled it over his head, revealing the magnificent sculpture of his chest. It was broad and firm, dusted with a fine layer of dark hair that narrowed to a line disappearing beneath the waistband of his trousers. His shoulders were wide, his arms strong, powerful. She reached out, unable to resist, her fingers ghosting over the warm skin of his chest, feeling the tautness of muscle, the beat of his heart beneath her palm. It was a primal, thrilling sensation. He shuddered slightly at her touch, a clear indication of his own unleashed desire. "You feel like fire," she whispered, her fingers tracing the path of his dark hair, down to his sternum. He captured her hand, bringing it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "And you, Alara, are the flame that ignites me." His gaze burned into hers, passionate and possessive. He then reached for her, his hands sliding around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The thin fabric of her camisole was no barrier to the heat radiating from his body. She felt the hard planes of his chest against her breasts, the taut muscles of his thighs against hers. The sensation was exquisite, a dizzying blend of soft and hard, yielding and unyielding. His mouth found hers again, a deeper, more demanding kiss this time, a hungry claiming. She met him with equal fervor, her own body humming with an electric energy she hadn't known she possessed. Her hands moved to his shoulders, then up to the strong column of his neck, her fingers tangling in the rich silk of his hair once more. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, her briefs offering no resistance against the powerful swell of his arousal. He carried her like a precious burden, his steps firm and steady, towards the vast, inviting bed. The velvet curtains had been drawn back, revealing a plush mattress covered in crisp white linen, and a luxurious pile of throws and pillows. He laid her gently on the bed, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent promise in their depths. The soft mattress swallowed her, a comforting embrace that contrasted with the fierce intensity of his gaze. He leaned over her, bracing himself on his forearms, his body hovering tantalizingly close, but not quite touching. "You are more beautiful than I could have imagined," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. His fingers reached out, slowly tracing the delicate lace of her camisole, following the curve of her breast, the line of her ribs. Each touch was a spark, setting her skin aflame. Her hands moved to the buckle of his belt, then to the buttons of his trousers. The fabric was rough under her fingers, a stark contrast to the softness of his shirt, the silk of his skin. He watched her, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps, his eyes dark with unmasked desire. She unfastened the buttons, her fingers brushing against the warm fabric beneath, the undeniable proof of his readiness. He groaned, a low, guttural sound, and then pushed himself up slightly, giving her room. She peeled away the remaining layers, revealing the full extent of his magnificent body. He was lean, powerful, and exquisitely proportioned, a testament to raw, untamed masculinity. Her gaze lingered on his arousal, thick and rigid, pulsing with a life of its own. A flush spread across her cheeks, but it was not shame. Only a fierce, primal awe. He reached down, his fingers circling the lace of her briefs, tugging them gently down her hips, over her thighs, until they joined the discarded clothes on the floor. She lay before him, utterly naked, completely vulnerable, yet filled with a fierce, defiant confidence. The firelight danced over her curves, painting her skin in shades of gold and amber. His gaze was reverent, adoring. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped her sex, his thumb brushing over the sensitive nub of her clitoris through the soft down. A jolt of pure pleasure shot through her, a gasp escaping her lips. Her hips arched instinctively, pressing into his hand, silently begging for more. "So wet," he murmured, his voice a low, seductive whisper. "So ready." He leaned down, capturing her mouth in a deep, languid kiss, his tongue tracing the soft contours of her lips, then delving inside, mirroring the intimacy of his touch below. His fingers moved with an exquisite slowness, exploring her, teasing her, bringing her to the precipice of sensation. She felt herself opening to him, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. This wasn't just about bodies, it was about souls intertwining, about two lonely hearts finding their echo in each other. He pulled back from the kiss, his eyes still locked with hers, burning with an almost feral intensity. "I want to taste you, Alara," he whispered, his voice raw with need. "I want to feel every inch of you." He moved, sliding down her body, his dark head descending. She watched him, her breath catching in her throat, a thrill of anticipation shooting through her. The moment his lips touched her, a profound, exquisite shock coursed through her. His tongue was a revelation, tracing, circling, delving with an expert tenderness that left her gasping, arching against the pillows. The world narrowed to the sensations he was creating, the exquisite pleasure blooming between her legs, spreading outward, consuming her. Her fingers tangled in his hair, holding him close, urging him on. The storm outside roared, a wild counterpoint to the storm raging within her. A tempest of pleasure that threatened to rip through her very core. She cried out, a soft, guttural sound, her body convulsing with the intensity of it. Wave after wave of pure, unadulterated bliss crashed over her, leaving her breathless, trembling, yet wanting more. He lifted his head, his eyes dark and satisfied, a triumphant gleam within them. "My beautiful Alara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He kissed her inner thigh, then slid up her body, until he was hovering above her once more, his powerful erection pressing against her. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears of pleasure. "Julian," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Please." The single word was a plea, an invitation, a surrender. He met her gaze, his own eyes burning with a fierce, tender passion. He reached down, guiding himself to her entrance, pressing against her gently. She was already slick and eager, her body aching for his complete possession. He entered her slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers, watching her expression, ensuring her comfort, her pleasure. The sensation was overwhelming, a stretching, a filling, a profound sense of completeness. She gasped, her body arching to meet him, taking him deeper, welcoming him into the very core of her being. He paused, allowing her body to acclimate, allowing them both to savor the exquisite feeling of being finally joined. Her hands went to his back, her fingers digging into the taut muscles, holding him close, anchoring herself to him. "You feel incredible," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, his eyes closed for a moment as he savored the sensation. He began to move, a slow, deep rhythm that quickly escalated, matching the frantic beat of her heart, the rising tide of her desire. Their bodies moved as one, a dance of ancient instincts, of profound connection. The sounds of their passion mingled with the raging storm outside, her gasps, his groans, the creaking of the old bed, the howling wind, the distant rumble of thunder. It was a symphony of desire, a primal song of two souls finally finding their harmony. He drove into her with a powerful rhythmic thrust, each stroke sending ripples of pleasure through her, building, pushing her closer and closer to the edge. Her head tossed on the pillow, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her legs wrapped tightly around his waist, pulling him deeper still. "Julian," she cried out, her voice raw, desperate, as the next wave of pleasure seized her, consuming her utterly. Her body convulsed around him, squeezing him, milking every last drop of sensation. She shattered, a million tiny shards of pleasure exploding within her, leaving her breathless, trembling, clinging to him as if he were her only anchor in the storm. He held her tightly, his own body rigid with effort, his eyes squeezed shut. With a final guttural cry, he surrendered, plunging into her depths, his release powerful and profound, a warm, thick rush that filled her, connecting them even more intimately. They lay tangled together, breathless, spent, the echoes of their passion still vibrating in the air, in their very bones. The storm outside, though still raging, seemed to have softened its ferocity, as if in deference to the profound peace that had settled over them. Julian rolled onto his side, pulling her with him, cradling her against his chest. Her head rested in the hollow of his shoulder, her arm thrown across his waist, her hand resting on his hip. She could feel the steady thrum of his heart against her ear, the warmth of his skin against hers, the comforting weight of his arm around her. He pressed a kiss to her hair, then to her forehead. "Elara," he whispered, his voice still thick with emotion, but softer now, laced with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "My Elara." She snuggled closer, inhaling his scent, feeling utterly safe, utterly cherished. The solitude she had sought had been shattered, replaced by a connection so profound, so unexpected, that it had irrevocably altered the landscape of her soul. This wasn't just about physical pleasure, though that had been exhilarating beyond measure. It was about something deeper, something that resonated with the very core of her being, a feeling of coming home to a place she hadn't known she was searching for. The storm continued its dance outside, but within the walls of Julian's room, a different kind of calm had settled, a warmth that promised to chase away the chill of the world. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic beat of his heart lull her, knowing that this was just the beginning. The whispers of the soul had become a roaring symphony, and she was ready to listen to every note. The night was still young, and the promises they had made, both spoken and unspoken, stretched out before them, endless and intoxicating. Her eyelids fluttered, a soft sigh escaping her lips as she burrowed deeper into the warmth beside her. The rhythmic beat of Julian's heart, a steady drum against her ear, was the most comforting sound in the world, a counterpoint to the distant, fading rumble of the storm that had just passed. The chill that had clung to the edges of the night had vanished, replaced by a profound radiant heat that emanated not just from their entwined bodies, but from the very core of their souls. She shifted slightly, her hand previously resting passively, now instinctively seeking purchase on the smooth, warm skin of his back. Her fingers splayed, tracing the hard, lean planes of his shoulder blades, the subtle curve of his spine beneath the soft fabric of his shirt. A shiver, not of cold but of awakening desire, ran through her. It was a gentle tremor, a testament to the quiet revolution that had taken place within her, a revolution sparked by his presence, by his touch, by the unspoken understanding that had bloomed between them. Julian stirred, a low, contented groan rumbling in his chest. His arm, which had been loosely draped around her waist, tightened, pulling her even closer, until there was no space left between them. She could feel the hard ridge of his hip against hers, the length of his thigh pressed to her own. His breath, warm and even, ghosted across her temple, carrying with it the faint, intoxicating scent of him, a blend of wood smoke, clean linen, and something uniquely masculine that made her senses swim. "Awake," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep, a low vibration against her ear. She didn't answer immediately, instead pressing a soft kiss to the warm skin of his neck. The taste of him was clean, earthy, a whisper of salt and something deeper, intrinsically him. It was a taste that promised comfort and adventure in equal measure. "Almost," she whispered back, her voice husky, barely audible. "Just savoring this." His arm tightened further, a silent acknowledgement. He shifted again, turning slightly so that their chests were pressed together, her head now resting in the hollow of his shoulder. In the dim light filtering through the heavy curtains, she could just make out the strong line of his jaw, the shadow of his eyelashes against his cheek. He was beautiful, she thought, in a rugged, utterly captivating way. Not just his physical form, but the quiet strength that emanated from him. The kindness in his eyes, the profound depth of his spirit that she was only just beginning to uncover. Her fingers resumed their exploration, moving from his back to the soft fabric of his shirt, tracing the edge of his collar. She felt the steady, powerful thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm, a living rhythm that resonated with her own. It was a harmony, a duet of souls, finding their perfect tempo together. "You feel good," he murmured, his fingers gently tangling in her hair, stroking the strands away from her face. His touch was exquisite, light as a feather, yet it sent a wave of warmth through her, settling deep in her core. So incredibly good. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing again, not in sleep, but in a surrender to the moment. The world outside, with its demands and its harsh realities, seemed to recede, fading into an indistinct hum. Here, in the soft cocoon of Julian's arms, there was only warmth, peace, and a burgeoning sense of something truly profound. Her hand drifted lower, over the lean expanse of his abdomen, feeling the taut muscle beneath the shirt. She felt a subtle ripple under her touch, a response that told her he was as aware of her as she was of him. A boldness bloomed within her, a quiet confidence she hadn't known she possessed, fueled by the undeniable current of desire that flowed between them. With a gentle tug, she began to unbutton his shirt, her fingers fumbling slightly in the dimness, but guided by an unerring instinct. Each button released felt like a small victory, a tiny unveiling. When the last button was undone, she pushed the fabric aside, revealing the broad expanse of his chest. It was firm, sculpted, lightly dusted with dark hair that narrowed as it descended. She pressed her palm flat against his skin, feeling the heat, the power, the living essence of him. Julian inhaled sharply, a soft sound, almost a gasp. He didn't move, allowing her to explore, but she felt the subtle tensing of his muscles, the quickening of his breath. His hand, still in her hair, now tangled deeper, holding her head gently but firmly, as if to anchor her to him. "You're beautiful," she whispered, her voice barely a breath against his skin as she leaned in, pressing a soft kiss just above his heart. His scent, stronger now, enveloped her, drawing her deeper into his spell. She felt the rapid drum of his heart beneath her lips, a wild beat mirroring her own. He exhaled slowly, a long, drawn-out sound that spoke of pleasure and longing. "Look at you," he countered, his voice a low rumble. "You have no idea how beautiful you are. How captivating." He pulled back slightly, just enough to look at her, his eyes dark and intense in the low light, searching hers. There was a raw, undeniable hunger in their depths, but also a profound tenderness that made her heart ache. His free hand moved, tracing the delicate curve of her jaw, then drifting down her neck, over her collarbone, lingering at the hollow of her throat, where her pulse beat a frantic rhythm. His touch was a revelation, awakening every nerve ending, sending exquisite shivers through her. She felt a deep, undeniable urge to shed the last vestiges of clothing that separated them, to feel the full, glorious contact of skin against skin. "Julian," she breathed, her voice a plea, a question, a surrender. He understood. He always seemed to understand. His thumb stroked the sensitive skin of her neck, then dipped lower, just beneath the edge of her nightgown. The subtle brush of his knuckle against her skin was enough to send a jolt of electricity through her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and serious, his gaze unwavering. It wasn't a question of desire. That was evident in every line of his body, every breath he took. It was a question of consent, of readiness, of honoring the unspoken promises they had made. Yes, she answered, her voice firm, unwavering. More than sure, I want this, Julian. I want in you. A small, knowing smile touched his lips, a profound relief washing over his features. He leaned in, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she met him halfway, eagerly. Their lips met, soft at first. A tentative exploration, a gentle brushing that promised more. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from the deepest part of her being, she opened to him, allowing him access, inviting him in. His kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more passionate. His lips moved over hers with a practiced grace, coaxing, demanding, giving. She responded in kind, her own lips parting, her tongue tangling with his in a slow, sensual dance. It was a kiss that consumed, that promised, that spoke volumes of their shared longing. The taste of him filled her senses, intoxicating and addictive. She felt herself melting into him, her body molding against his, every curve finding its perfect counterpoint. His hand, which had been tracing the line of her throat, now slipped under the fabric of her nightgown, his fingers warm against her bare skin. He moved slowly, sensually, pushing the soft material upwards, revealing more and more of her. She shivered, a delicious tremor that spoke of anticipation. When his fingers reached the delicate lace edge of her bra, he paused, his thumb brushing lightly against the swell of her breast. A gasp escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound that was lost in the depths of their kiss. He broke the kiss then, pulling back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes still closed. "Let me," he whispered, his voice hoarse with desire. She nodded, breathless, unable to form words. She trusted him implicitly, completely. His hands worked deftly, untying the delicate ribbons of her nightgown, then pushing it gently up and over her head. The cool air brushed against her skin for a moment, a fleeting sensation before his warm hands returned, cupping her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes, when they opened, were dark pools of desire, but filled with an overwhelming tenderness that made her heart clench. He took a moment, his gaze sweeping over her, a silent appreciation that felt both vulnerable and incredibly powerful. She felt no shame, no self-consciousness, only a profound sense of being utterly seen, cherished, and desired. Her own hands, emboldened, reached for him, pulling his shirt from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor in a soft heap. Then, her fingers went to the buckle of his belt, a shy but determined movement. "Let me," she echoed his earlier words, a soft smile playing on her lips. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her. "By all means." He leaned back slightly, allowing her full access. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfastened his belt, then the button of his trousers. The denim gave way, and she slowly, deliberately, began to push them down over his hips, along the powerful line of his legs. He lifted his hips slightly, assisting her, and soon his trousers joined his shirt on the floor. He was now clad only in his boxers, and the sight of his lean, muscular form, bathed in the dim light, took her breath away. His body was a masterpiece of strength and grace, broad shoulders, a defined chest, a flat stomach that tapered to narrow hips. Every line spoke of power and latent energy. Her gaze lingered, appreciating the sheer masculine beauty of him. He reached for her again, pulling her close, the bare skin of his chest pressing against her own. The contact was electric, sending a shiver of pure sensation through her. Her nipples, already hard with anticipation, brushed against the soft hair on his chest, sending exquisite sparks through her. She gasped, arching into him, craving more. Julian's hands moved to the delicate straps of her bra, his fingers tracing the lace. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her hair. "Please," she whispered, her voice thick with desire. With a gentle click, the clasp gave way. He slid the straps down her arms, letting the lace fall away, revealing her breasts in their full soft glory. He didn't rush, but took his time, his eyes devouring her, a silent homage. His gaze was reverent, appreciative, not objectifying, and that made all the difference. She felt beautiful, utterly desirable, completely cherished. His hand rose, slowly, deliberately, to cup one breast. His palm was warm, strong, and his thumb brushed lightly over her nipple, sending a jolt of white-hot pleasure through her. She moaned, a low, guttural sound she barely recognized as her own. His touch was exquisite, delicate yet firm, awakening every nerve ending. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the sensitive skin of her neck, then moving lower, trailing a path of fire across her collarbone, over the curve of her shoulder, and finally to the peak of her breast. He sucked, gently, tenderly, his tongue laving the sensitive skin, sending waves of pleasure radiating through her. She arched her back, pressing herself more fully into his embrace, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, holding him close. "Julian," she gasped, her body alight, trembling with a desire that was almost unbearable. He moved to her other breast, giving it the same devoted attention, suckling and teasing until she was writhing beneath him, breathless and desperate for more. His hand, meanwhile, had not been idle. It had moved lower, over her stomach, tracing circles, then dipping lower still, to the soft swell of her hip. She wore only her panties now, a thin barrier between his touch and her most intimate self. He paused there, his fingers brushing lightly against the sensitive apex of her thighs, sending a fresh wave of heat through her. She felt herself clenching, tightening, her core aching with a longing that was almost painful in its intensity. "You're so ready for me," he whispered against her skin, his voice thick with his own desire. She could only nod, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "Please, Julian," she pleaded. "I need you." He understood. With a tender grace, he slipped his hand beneath the elastic of her panties, his fingers brushing against the soft, warm skin of her inner thigh. The contact was electrifying, sending a jolt straight to her core. He moved slowly, deliberately, teasingly, until his fingers found the soft, moist folds of her desire. She gasped, her body arching into his touch. He was so gentle, so exquisitely sensitive, yet so utterly commanding. His fingers began to explore, tracing the swollen curves, finding the most sensitive points, eliciting soft moans and gasps from her. She felt herself unraveling, her control slipping away, replaced by a pure, unadulterated sensation. His lips found hers again, a hungry, demanding kiss that mirrored the passion his fingers were igniting within her. He delved deeper, his tongue mimicking the rhythm of his fingers, exploring, teasing, pushing her further and further to the brink. She was lost in a haze of sensation, her body humming with a pleasure so intense it was almost painful. Her hips began to move instinctively, pressing against his hand, seeking deeper contact, more pressure. She was a vessel of pure sensation, her mind emptied of everything but Julian, his touch, his taste, his scent. He pulled his hand away for a moment, and a small whimper of protest escaped her lips. But then, he was lifting her slightly, shifting their positions. He reached down, and with a practiced ease, removed his boxers, then her panties, discarding them both to join the other clothes on the floor. Now, there was nothing left between them. Nothing but skin, muscle, bone, and the raw, undeniable force of their desire. He lay her back down on the soft mattress, his body hovering above hers. She gazed up at him, her eyes wide with longing, taking in the magnificent sight of him. His chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, his eyes dark with passion, his jaw tight with controlled desire. She reached up, her hands cupping his face, pulling him down for another searing kiss. "I've wanted you for so long," she whispered against his lips, the words a raw confession. "And I, you," he responded, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know." He positioned himself between her legs, the hard, warm proof of his desire pressing against her. She gasped, her hips instinctively arching up to meet him, inviting him in. He paused, his gaze locked with hers, a question in his eyes, an offering. It was a moment of exquisite tension, of shared anticipation, of promises about to be fulfilled. "Are you ready, my love?" he asked, his voice a low, throaty rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely audible, but filled with an unwavering certainty. "Oh yes." He began to move, slowly, deliberately, pushing into her, taking his time, allowing her body to adjust, to stretch, to welcome him. She felt him fill her, slowly, exquisitely, a sensation of profound completion, of finally being made whole. She gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure, her body tightening around him, welcoming him deeper. He paused when he was fully embedded within her, groaning softly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling, ragged and fast. "Perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are absolutely perfect." She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, wanting every inch of him. "You are too," she murmured, her nails lightly raking his back in delicious torment. Then he began to move. Slowly at first, a gentle rocking motion that built steadily, rhythmically. Each thrust was a wave of pure sensation, pushing her higher, further. She met him thrust for thrust, their bodies moving in an ancient dance, a symphony of touch and feeling. The bed creaked softly beneath them, a rhythmic counterpoint to their gasps and moans. He leaned down, burying his face in her neck, raining kisses there, his breath hot against her skin. "Look at me," he urged, pulling back slightly, his eyes blazing with a fierce passion. She met his gaze, lost in the depths of his desire, her own reflected back at her. The rhythm intensified, becoming faster, more urgent. Her body was a coil of exquisite tension, winding tighter and tighter with each powerful thrust. The world narrowed to this bed, this room to Julian, to the incredible sensations that consumed her. She felt herself approaching the precipice, the edge of an abyss of pleasure. "Julian," she cried out, her voice raw, desperate, as the first tremors began to ripple through her. He met her intensity, his own movements becoming more powerful, more demanding. He held her gaze, sharing the journey with her, their eyes locked in a silent conversation of pleasure and surrender. The pressure built, an exquisite ache, a glorious burning. And then she shattered. Waves of pleasure crashed over her, one after another, an earthquake of sensation that shook her to her core. Her body convulsed around him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her head thrashing on the pillow. She cried out, a long drawn-out moan that was pure, unadulterated ecstasy. He held her close, his own climax building swiftly on the heels of hers. With a final guttural cry, he surged into her, releasing his own passion in a powerful wave that flooded her, intertwining their pleasure, binding them together in a moment of sublime unity. They lay tangled together, breathless, spent, their bodies still humming with the aftershocks of their shared release. His weight on her was comforting, grounding. She felt utterly depleted, yet simultaneously filled, complete in a way she had never known. Julian moved slightly, propping himself up on an elbow, his eyes soft with tenderness as he looked down at her. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "My love," he whispered, his voice still hoarse, filled with emotion. She smiled, a soft, languid curve of her lips. Her body felt heavy, deliciously so, her muscles humming with residual pleasure. "That was..." She searched for the words, but none seemed adequate. "Everything." He chuckled, a low, contented sound. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her lips, a lingering, tender touch that spoke of promise and devotion. "It was just the beginning," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over her face, as if memorizing every detail. He shifted, carefully, gently, rolling onto his side, pulling her against him so that her back was pressed to his front. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his length, his hand resting intimately on her stomach. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and she felt the warmth of his breath in her hair. She closed her eyes again, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against her back, the warmth of his body enveloping hers. The storm had passed entirely now, leaving behind a profound stillness, a sense of quiet renewal. The world outside was hushed, ready for a new day. But within these walls, within the sanctuary of Julian's arms, time seemed to stand still. The night had unfolded in ways she could never have imagined, revealing depths of passion and connection she hadn't known were possible. It was a journey of discovery, of surrender, of profound intimacy. And as the first faint hint of dawn began to paint the sky outside, a soft, ethereal glow filtering through the curtains, she knew with absolute certainty that this was not an ending. This was merely the exquisite overture to a symphony that had just begun. The whispers of the soul had become a roaring symphony, and she was ready to listen to every note for all the nights to come. The promises they had made, both spoken and unspoken, stretched out before them, endless and intoxicating, beckoning them into a future woven with threads of passion, love, and an undeniable devotion. They stirred together, a slow, languid unraveling, from the tight embrace of sleep. Her cheek was pressed against the warm expanse of his chest, the rhythmic thrum of his heart a lullaby against her ear. A stray beam of sunlight, softened by the sheer curtains, painted a golden stripe across the rumpled sheets, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air. She inhaled deeply, a delicious cocktail of his unique scent, warm skin, lingering musk, and a faint whisper of the crisp night air that had snuck in through the open window, filling her senses. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and she felt the answering rumble deep within him. His arm, heavy and protective, was still draped across her waist, his fingers gently splayed against her bare skin. She shifted slightly, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles well used, a testament to the night's wondrous exertions. A small, contented smile curved her lips, a silent acknowledgement of the beautiful memories now etched into her very being. His eyes, the color of warm honey, slowly fluttered open, finding hers. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, only a profound tenderness that mirrored her own heart. He didn't speak, just tightened his hold imperceptibly, his thumb tracing a slow, hypnotic circle on her hip. It was a silent conversation, a reaffirmation of every unspoken promise made in the darkness, a quiet declaration of continued devotion. "Morning," she whispered, her voice still thick with sleep and contentment. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured back, his voice a low, gravelly caress that sent shivers down her spine. He leaned down, brushing a soft kiss against her forehead, then her temple, lingering at the corner of her eye before finally settling on her lips. It was a kiss of pure tenderness, unhurried and deep, tasting of sleep and newfound intimacy, a promise of countless more to come. "Did you dream?" she asked, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. He chuckled softly, a sound that vibrated through her. "Only of you, and us, and what a dream it was!" His eyes held a playful glint, but beneath it, a depth of emotion that made her heart swell. "I feel like I've been waiting for this dream my whole life, unknowingly, until now." She nestled closer, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble that had grown overnight. "Me too," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "It's more than I ever imagined possible." He kissed the top of her head, pulling her even tighter against him, as if to absorb her into his very being. The world outside their bedroom, with its demands and its schedules, felt impossibly distant. Here, in the soft glow of morning, time seemed to stretch and warp, granting them an eternity within minutes, each second savored, cherished. They lay there for a long time, simply existing in each other's presence. There was no need for words, only the comfort of shared breath, the warmth of entwined limbs, and the quiet understanding that had blossomed between them. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a quiet knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with the person she was meant to be with, forever changed and forever home. He eventually stirred, propping himself up on an elbow, his gaze sweeping over her face, as if trying to memorize every curve, every shadow, every nuance of her expression. "I don't want this to end," he said, his voice raw with sincerity, a vulnerability that touched her deeply. "It won't," she replied instantly, reaching up to cup his cheek, her thumb gently stroking his skin. "This is just the beginning of forever, the first page of our story." He smiled, a genuine, heart-melting smile that reached his eyes, crinkling at the corners. "Forever sounds pretty good with you. More than good. It sounds perfect." He leaned in again, his lips finding the hollow of her throat, sending a fresh wave of exquisite sensation through her. His touch was light, exploratory, full of reverence and a playful promise of more to come. He traced the delicate line of her collarbone, his fingers brushing against the swell of her breast, awakening a languid heat within her that was both familiar and gloriously new. "What do you want to do today?" she whispered, her voice a little breathless as his lips moved lower, teasing her skin. He pulled back slightly, his eyes sparkling with mischief and adoration. "Everything. Nothing. As long as it's with you, every moment will be a treasure." He kissed her again, a slow, possessive kiss that left no doubt about his desires, both immediate and enduring. "But first," he murmured against her lips, "I want to watch the sun rise properly with you, and then maybe breakfast in bed, or just stay in bed, exploring the new landscape of Guge." She laughed softly, a joyful, uninhibited sound that filled the room and seemed to chase away any remaining shadows. "That sounds perfect, absolutely perfect." As they eventually disentangled themselves from the sheets, the movements were slow, deliberate, each touch a lingering caress. There was a newfound grace in their proximity, a comfortable familiarity that spoke of a bond forged not just in passion, but in a deeper emotional resonance, a recognition of souls intertwined. They moved around the room in tandem, gathering close, sharing glances that were rich with meaning, each gesture a silent conversation, a reaffirmation of their connection. The world outside beckoned, but it felt less like an intrusion and more like an extension of their shared space, a vibrant backdrop to their unfolding narrative. The promises made in the twilight hours had solidified into a tangible reality, a foundation upon which they would build their future, brick by brick, kiss by kiss. It wasn't just about the thrill of discovery, but the profound joy of recognition, of finding the missing piece, the other half of a soul that had unknowingly yearned for this completeness. Later, sitting together on the balcony, wrapped in a single blanket, mugs of steaming coffee warming their hands, they watched the city slowly awaken beneath the gentle blush of dawn. The air was crisp, carrying the distant murmur of life, but their small world remained an oasis of quiet intimacy. His arm was around her, pulling her close, and her head rested on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her ear, a rhythm she knew she could listen to forever. "This," he said, his voice soft, imbued with a deep sense of contentment, "this is what home feels like. This is where I belong." She tightened her hold on him, a tear of pure, unadulterated happiness pricking at the corner of her eye. "Yes," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion, "it is, for both of us." The warmth of his embrace, the scent of him, the quiet comfort of their shared silence, it all wove together into a tapestry of belonging, of love found and cherished. The symphony had indeed begun, not with a crashing crescendo, but with a gentle, resonant chord that promised harmony and depth for all their days. The future, once a shimmering, distant concept, now stretched before them, a clear, open road, bathed in the golden light of their undeniable devotion, each step to be taken together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the beautiful, passionate, love-filled nights and days to come.